So everyone has been talking about Bird Game 3 lately, but what even is Bird Game 3? Well, according to my Instagram For You page, it is a multiplayer class-based bird fighting game. But Bird Game 3 isn't like other games, because other games are actually playable. You see, the entire concept of Bird Game 3 is actually just AI-generated videos, and it's not actually a playable game at all. Basically, the entire internet has Mandela affected itself into believing that the game is real, going as far to discuss hypothetical builds and metas. So I'm going to cure this case of internet-wide schizophrenia by turning their AI-induced delusions into a real playable game. But in order to do that, I actually need to find out what the hell Bird Game 3 is actually supposed to be. Some people are saying it's a Fortnite-like battle royale game, while others are saying it's a survival game similar to Ark. But the few things that everyone agrees on is 1, it's a competitive multiplayer game where you play as birds and steal each other's eggs, and 2, the hummingbird is overpowered. I also keep seeing videos where the birds can use League of Legends style abilities, but I'm pretty sure that's the AI hallucinating that birds can cast magic spells, so we're just gonna avoid that part. So to get started, I created a new Godot project, and I downloaded a 3D terrain add-on to make making our open world map a little easier. But first I was going to need some textures for our map, so I went to a free texture website, downloaded the first grass texture that I saw, and this was the result. Oh man, this looks like dog shit. Why does it look like Rice Krispies, man? I need a different grass texture, I think. Here, maybe I can try to like fix it a little bit. Yeah, okay, I think that made it worse. So I instead opted to create my own grass texture, and when I put it into the editor, it actually turned out looking pretty alright. So with the basic terrain layout of the map now finished, I began work creating the first bird for our game. I decided that the pigeon would be the best baseline bird to start with, so I opened up Blender and I began modeling. So I got the basic shape of the pigeon down pretty alright. I mean, this is pretty good for me, I suck at modeling. But then it was time to do the wings, and yeah, these don't look good. So after quickly throwing together some textures, I imported it into Godot and it was time to begin animating. I made a basic flapping and walking animation because that's honestly all we're gonna need. And I pasted the model onto a basic player controller so we could see how it looks in game. Alright, let's see how it turned out. Oh yeah, this is awesome. Okay, so I haven't coded the animation yet or the camera rotation, so this is all we get, but looks pretty good so far. I think we're headed in the right direction. I had some issues fixing the camera rotation at first, but I eventually got it all working. At this point, I realized the world was kind of looking a little bare, so that would be the next thing I would be working on. So I went back to Blender and I quickly modeled up a basic pine tree, but for some reason I gave it some really sharp leaves, but I was too lazy to fix it, so I decided to just keep it. After I was finished, I realized the tree looked a bit short, so I just stretched it out a little. While I was at it, I threw together a quick boulder model to give our world a little more life. And I say threw together, but I actually spent way longer making rocks than I would like to admit. But at least now we have plenty of variation, I guess. So I once again imported everything into Godot, set up the collisions, and we were now ready to begin actually designing the map. I wanted the map to look kind of like an overgrown quarry or maybe some sort of valley surrounded by mountains, so I gave the map a big bowl shape. After downloading an add-on to give the map some grass, the map really started to come together. And there was probably a better way to do this, but I ended up spending around an hour just manually planting grass across the entire map. But you know, it's not about the journey, it's about the result. So for the trees, I downloaded another add-on to help me place them automatically so I wouldn't have to manually plant trees again, and it crashed. Okay, so apparently the add-on I was going to use to place trees no longer works, judging by this mysterious red text at the bottom of my screen. So I spent yet another hour manually placing hundreds of objects, but in the end it actually ended up being worth it because we actually had a decent looking map. The final map-related thing I wanted to add was a waterfall to give the map a little more character, and also to have something fun to fly through. So I made a hole in the ground and I added a very realistic looking water texture. And for the waterfall, I literally just made a particle emitter spew out a ton of vaguely water looking particles. So after adding some volumetric fog and doing a few minor color adjustments, the map was finally finished. But we still had one minor problem. We still can't actually fly, or do anything for that matter. So for basically the first time in this entire video, it was time to actually write some code. First, I began by making a basic state machine in order to know the difference between not flying and flying, and then I made it so it gives you a little bit of vertical lift when you hold the spacebar. And just like that, we technically already have flight. You know, it's just that you can only fly in the one direction forever. So after a few minor adjustments, we finally have flight. Okay, that's not flight yet. It took me multiple failed attempts to actually get the flight looking like real flight, but eventually I was able to figure it out and now we can fly, give or take a few visual bugs. Now we can actually begin to start adding some features from our source material. The key thing that comes up time and time again in most of these videos is the egg stealing mechanic, which seems to be what the entire game revolves around. So in Blender, I shaped up a few quick models, imported them into Godot, and I think I made the egg a little too big. But now I had an egg model and a nest to work with, so it was time to actually give these items some functionality. So I wanted to make it so when you approach to the nest, the egg would attach to your model in some way, and then allow you to depot the egg into your own nest. I haven't thought of a way for the eggs to actually reward the player, other than just having more eggs, but that's something we can figure out later. So it was now time to actually test it, and surprisingly, it worked first try. I didn't know where to put the egg when you grabbed it, so I just made it stack on top of your head. With the ability to steal eggs out of the way, we're still missing one key component of Bird Game 3, which is, of course, multiplayer. But since I have no friends to test it with, I decided to just code my own AI friends, and worry about networking some other time. This will allow me to work on combat and other features for the time being. So because our AI will essentially just be the same as our player node, I copied over most of the functionality from the player and then gave it some new functionality. So because these are AI birds and not player birds, I made them red and evil so you can instantly tell how evil they are. I even took some extra steps to make him extra evil, and now there should be absolutely no confusion how evil this bird is. So as for the actual functionality of the bird, I gave it two main states: a search mode, which moves the bird into a random direction, and a follow mode, which triggers when the player enters the detection radius. But I quickly ran into a few problems. One, when there are multiple birds following the player, they would collapse into a singularity of like 10 birds, and then explode in multiple different directions when the player got too far away. To solve this, I threw a collision box on the bird and I hoped for the best, which surprisingly actually ended up working out pretty well. The second main problem that the birds had was that the birds would never actually get close enough to attack you. They would just inch towards you, getting infinitely closer without ever actually reaching the player. The solution to this actually ended up being to add a second detection radius around the bird, which increased its speed for a brief moment enough to catch up. So when the bird enters the detection radius, it'll do a short dash enough to damage you, and that ended up working out pretty well. So with that, we now actually have working bird AI, which means the only thing left to do is to add combat. And what's the most important part of any combat system? That's right, we're adding ragdolls, because realistic death physics will fit in any game environment, even if it's about birds. And the good thing about adding ragdolls is that they always work flawlessly first time, every time. Absolutely no bugs or issues. And once I got the ragdoll system actually working, I copy and pasted the functionality onto all of the enemy birds as well, which will come in use later. But first, we'll need to add a basic attack for the player, and I think the most appropriate move for a pigeon to have would be the ability to shit on everything. So I coded in a simple projectile, and I made it spawn below the player, which worked pretty much first try. And with that out of the way, we now have our very first working prototype of Bird Game 3. Just like the videos, guys. There's no difference. It looks exactly the same. But of course, we still have a mountain of things to add before we're actually finished, such as online multiplayer, bird classes, a lobby system, and much more. But if you want to see me finish the game, make sure to subscribe for future videos, and if this gets enough attention, maybe I'll make it into a full game. Anyway, goodbye.